Hey everybody, Rockin Robbie Billups here for Pop Culture Philosophers, and we got a special treat for you today. We got a conversation with Nicholas Cara, author of the Gray Ghost series. Nick, thanks for coming on the show, first of all.
Thank you, Robbie.
It's a pleasure to be here. Tell us a little bit about the book, what's coming out, the previous book, the whole series. What's up with Gray Ghost?
Well, the Gray Ghost series, well, first, thanks for letting me come on Pop Culture Philosophers. I watch you guys all the time, so it's great to be here. Well, the Gray Ghost series, it's my series based in the 1940s. It's completely original characters, and it's sort of a pulp action story. You know, it's got a superhero in it, the Gray Ghost, but it keeps that old kind of radio serial feel. Like if you're listening to an old episode of The Shadow or The Green Hornet. And those are my sort of my favorite kind of things to do of old, radio show kind of to listen to. So I wanted to keep that same feel to it.
Yeah.
And so the Gray Ghost is mainly based on, it's the story of Joe Bavine, who's our main character, and he's a wounded soldier that comes back during the 1940s from being overseas. And when he comes back, he's missing his one leg. So he comes back to his family, to his job, and he tries to reincorporate himself into that society in Capstone City. Well, he finds at first it's a little harder than he thought it would be, and I did a lot of research back of what a soldier coming back then in the 40s would be like compared to today. Mm-hmm. And I tried to incorporate those kind of feelings he had and what he had to go through. They didn't have the sort of really cool prosthetics or anything like they have now. So he had, was walking around in crutches, falling in mud for a little while. But he comes back, gets back with his family, gets back with his girlfriend, Kate Stone, gets back with his partner, because before Joe went off to be in the Army, he was actually a member of the Capstone City Police Department. Okay. So he gets back with his partner, Patsy, and he actually gets back onto the force because Capstone City's finding that everyone is going off to fight war, and they don't have a huge group of police officers actually to patrol that city. So he gets his job back, starts getting his life back together, and then of course everything collapses down. Mm-hmm. They go through some trials and tribulations, but through that he finds this item called the Spartan Cloak, and with that item, it gives him these powers that he never could imagine before. And with that item and those powers, he decides, I can do more than what just Joe Bavine now can do. So he becomes this sort of avenger of that time. Yeah. He becomes the Gray Ghost. And finding that item actually sort of traps him into this world that he didn't know his city had. And that's the whole first story, is the origin of the character and sort of the world around him.
And that's The Shadow That Walks.
That's the first book, The Gray Ghost, The Shadow That Walks. So now we're getting into the second book, which is coming out on December 12th. And you don't always have to have Peter Parker get bit by the spider. Mm-hmm. So now the origin's been told, and we're just off on the races. So things have been going since the first book, and then suddenly a new character, the Jeweled Kiss, pops in. Okay. Completely foreign to Joe and his entire sort of core of characters. She just comes in and turns the entire city upside down. And throughout that, she actually is laying a trap for the Gray Ghost and the entire city that they don't even see coming till later. Yeah. So that's the sequel.
Okay. Awesome. Why did you want to tell this story, and just what brings you, what interested you in storytelling to begin with?
Well, I've always been an avid reader. Pretty much I would say since middle school. I probably could get through a novel, a good paperback novel in a week. Mm-hmm. And so it was just like, I worked at Barnes & Noble once just to get the discount. Yeah, right. to then be able to buy the books. Oh yeah. And so when you're reading all these different kinds of media, whether it's just a novel or not even comic books, you hear of these characters and you're always sitting there going, man, I wish I could come up with one of those. I wish I could think of those characters. And every now and then I started with it, and I started thinking of a plot or thinking of a story, and nothing ever caught. But finally I was able to, this one character just came up with, and actually came up with the fact that he's injured, because I've always wondered how, and I sometimes in the book we mock it a little bit, of how a superhero is you never figure out a superhero's, you can't tell through the glasses Clark Kent's Superman.
Yeah.
And I play with that a lot. Well, I came up with that idea of a wounded soldier. No one can think he's this guy running around on a rooftop saving people because he doesn't have a leg.
Yeah.
And I had to think of I guess, plausible with, superhero world of a reason that he could get that leg back.
Yeah.
So, and I got in, I kept rolling with it. And, starting off with the novel series, the character was except for the names, I got the names down. Because the names are actually based off some family members I know, turned a little.
Okay.
But, like Joe Bavine is actually, my grandfather was Joe Benjavino.
Okay.
So I cut it down a little, and so I kept those, but the characters kept changing in the right way as I was writing it.
Yeah.
Originally, I almost fell into the trap of he had too much power. He was almost like impossible. You couldn't beat him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, no, you can't do that. So I kept taking powers away from him, taking things off of him, and then eventually he came into this character that his main ability is actually walking through a wall.
Mm-hmm.
That's his main ability, but then I tried to figure out, not scientifically, but in a way that made sense scientifically, why can he walk through a wall and what he can do because of that. He can manipulate the matter around him to be able to pass through things. Well, then he also could, change his coat to black or his hat to white. And, that also helped with his change from Joe Bavine to the Gray Ghost.
Okay.
So it just kept rolling, and then the adventure storyline is something I've had in my head since I ever went to school, because as an engineer, we've been taught of this situation with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge since like day one, freshman year. It's like, this is this thing that happened. And I remember thinking in class, that would be an amazing story that no one has ever written.
Uh-huh.
So I had to blend the two in, and it just worked out. They ended up blending and making a really nice cake.
Okay. What is your goal with this book? What do you want to get what do you want your reader to get out of this book?
I've always, going into these stories, I never wanted to be too heavy with it. I just wanted the reader to be able to pick it up and have an adventure with these characters.
Yeah, just like the serial Pulp.
Yeah, it's like, your life's not going to change by reading it, but you're going to enjoy every single second of it. And you're just like, I found a lot of people have done that because they're like, I always want to get to the next page. I'm like, that's exactly what I want. I want you to get to that end of that chapter and go, let's see what happened.
Yeah.
And I always try to leave it off like, hey, and chapter 3, and chapter 4.
Yeah.
And I want to, when I've gone to different conventions and stuff, people have asked me then, I've always like, this story is based in physics, sprinkled with magic, and jam-packed with adventure.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to just go, wow, I sort of understand what was happening, and I enjoyed every second of it.
Absolutely. How is the second book going to differ from the first one?
Well, the first book, as an origin story, sets up a lot of the characters, and it tells the reader, who Joe is, who Kate is, and who Patsy is, and what kind of strengths they're going to bring to their reading experience, because it's not all just based off Joe. If without his girlfriend Kate, who is an engineer, and his partner Patsy, who is on the police force, certain things wouldn't fall his way. And you understand that this trio actually is. Joe has the powers, but without them all together, they can't get the job done.
Yeah.
So you set that all up in the first one, and it builds this mysterious organization that's coming. It's like it's not Lord of the Rings, but Game of Thrones. The dragons are coming, and it teases at this organization. It leaves little hints of this main character named Minos, and you're like, who's this guy? And you learn a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. But then when you get to the second one, it just hits you. You know who Minos is. You know what's going on, and then you're seeing it, and you're seeing like these hands coming around the main character slowly as the book's building.
Yeah.
Even on the back cover of the book, I have this hand going at him, because the first one, you don't know they're there, but then slowly this organization is coming after the character. And it's a mystery of why they're coming after him, because it's all built in together with the Spartan cloak and what they need of it, and them finding out he has it, which they don't know in the first one, but then they find out, and it's just coming. And then what is the jeweled kiss? That's the main, that's like the standalone mystery itself. Like, who is she, and why is she doing what she's doing, and how does that tie all together with everything going on?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your writing process? What kind of process do you go through when you're writing these novels?
Well, the first thing I do is I figure out the ending I will be happy with, because as a reader, the worst thing for me is if I read a whole book and it's a great book, and then the ending just dies.
Yeah.
And I hate that. There's some of my favorite authors and my favorite novels, I do that, and I'm reading the ending, I'm like, and I thought I'm missing pages. So I come up with the ending, and when I first came together with the entire storyline, I figured out the ending of the first book, the second book, and I figured out the ending of the whole trilogy. You know, how it's going to finish off.
Yeah.
And then knowing how the first book was going to start out, I actually just write out a timeline. And as I'm writing, I'm just checking it off. And when I change something, you just have this like offshoot of the timeline and a new time. It's like Back to the Future, where it just cuts up.
Yeah.
And it's just built up, and how everything's going to build to the same ending, though, because I just have that ending set in my head. And it works out really well that way.
Okay. So you start with the ending. That way you have that down, and there you go. And then you build backwards. Yeah,
because it's like you can see it on the horizon, and you're just building to it and building to it and building to it.
Okay.
And when you get to those last chapters writing, that is the best feeling. I mean, I remember on the first book, I was sitting at Starbucks on Airport Road. I was scribbling like a madman because I'm like at the last chapter, and I'm just enjoying every second, because finally I get to say that story I've had in my head for probably like 3 years. And you're building to it, and it's just like, bam.
Absolutely. Well, you're a busy man. You have a day job and you have a family. So when you do find the time to write, about how many hours a day or week do you write?
Well, it really does change. Say for the first book I would try to carve out maybe a week, maybe 2 to 3 hours a week to write it.
Okay.
And it worked out because both my wife and I are readers, so we could go to Starbucks, sit there, she'll be reading a novel, and I'll be sitting there scribbling away in my notebook, and it really worked out well. And it worked out the way for the second one too. We now have our first son, Thomas, and the timing has gone way down. So, but it is, because I still had about a quarter left of the second book when he was born, and I would just have to fill time in, maybe an hour a week if I got that, with like 10-minute periods a day.
Absolutely.
But I got it done. So that was great.
So time, guys, is not an excuse. You could be the busiest person in the world and still find the time to make your dreams come true, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when you were doing this book, you mentioned earlier about researching it and like what it was actually like back in the day for war vets coming back, especially injured. What other research did you do, or references, and how do you go about that?
Well, a lot of that was trying to make everything, you want to make a magical world, but you want to build it in the real world too. That's the fun part of it. And I did a lot of that research in the prosthetics and everything. And the bad part was, as the engineer, because that's my day job, I would find out like stuff they have now, and I'm like, oh, that is amazing, that's awesome. I can't use that. I mean, you really can't. So I would have to like really calm myself down with that. But a lot of it was more historical research on dates for me.
Okay.
Because just in the prologue, it starts off right at the crux of an invasion over in Europe, in Greece, and you see like this "it's coming" kind of thing that all the characters are talking about, because the Germans and the Italians are just about to invade Greece.
Okay.
And I had to sort of get that timing down, because if I had gone too far into the invasion, it made no sense the characters would be there.
Yeah.
But then if they get caught there, it's because they were there, and then they got caught there, and then they have to work their way back to the States. And also in that, it had to explain, and I haven't even got around to certain parts of it yet of what did Joe go off in the war to do?
Mm-hmm.
And, certain characters come together with those characters. Like I have a character in the second book, Marcus Benford, and they were friends in the army. But then I had to sort of try to figure out, would there be integrated groups like that in the army, and then explain away why Marcus was in that group, and why him being in that, without getting too heavy in it, caused something that the second book goes into.
Okay.
So I tried to get into that, and even in the grand story of it, because Joe's actually injured before World War II happens.
Okay.
A friend of mine was reading. He's like, your dates, Pearl Harbor didn't happen yet, and I'm like, I know. I'm getting to that. It's coming. The dragons are coming.
What tips would you have for aspiring writers out there?
I would find the one thing about your character that you like, and just keep focusing on that. I built the character of Joe Bavine personality-wise before I built his hero abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew who Joe was in my head before I gave him powers. And by doing that, I can understand, Joe wouldn't do that. Joe would do that. Joe would do that and hate himself.
Yeah.
And I could play with that. And then from knowing the man, you then know what kind of friends he would have. And then you know what kind of girl would he be dating.
Yeah.
I tried to make this, Kate Stone is his girlfriend, and I didn't want to make her this damsel in distress in the book. And I had to look at it like, would Joe date a girl like that? And he's like, yes, Joe would. And Joe would love that. And Joe would ask her questions every 5 minutes, like, Kate, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Because he reaches out to members in his family, he reaches out to his friends for help, even though he can walk through a wall.
Okay.
So keep that core part of your character, and then you could just, layer and layer on top of it.
Okay, absolutely. What was the most difficult part of writing this book?
The most difficult, probably a lot of writers go through this, is online now compared to maybe 20 years ago. There's a lot of different ways you can get published, but there's a lot of traps too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of traps. I found a lot of ones online where they're like, hey, send us your manuscript, and we know these guys and know these guys, and we could get you in touch with HarperCollins, within a week.
Yeah.
And they get your hopes up and everything, and then you send it at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday and 8 a.m. on a Thursday. They're like, we read your entire book and it's garbage. I'm like, you what? It's like, there's no way you read a 200-some page book that long. Yeah. Oh, wait, at the bottom, you have a service that will help my book be better. So there's a lot of that, and it actually gets, it sort of, since I didn't know the publishing world that well, it gets you a little down every now and then. But once you get that one publisher to get your work out, and you figure out all the nuances of it, it gets easier.
Absolutely. Nice. So what inspires you to do this? We talked about your influence and why you wanted to storytell. You always loved reading, things like that. But what inspired you to be like, I'm finally just going to do it?
The one thing that actually kept me going with it is writing this novel series and doing all this actually incorporates all of my hobbies.
Okay.
Which keeps me interested. That was one of the problems I had when I would start off before, is writing is a hobby of mine, but it's not like my only hobby. So I would start writing, and then I'm like, man, I really want to do some art, or I want to build a Lego model, or build a model or something, and I would go off and do that, and then I would just forget the writing after a while.
Yeah.
Well, this book series for me, it's sort of a mixture of everything. I would write 3-4 chapters, and then I would go work on the book cover. I did both of the book covers on this on the first book and the second. And then I'll work on that for a little bit, then go back to writing. Then I would, write a little bit more. Then I would go work on the Facebook page and do some advertisements for it. Then go back to writing. And it was incorporating both my love of art and of just designing things into the writing that just kept me motivated to keep going and going with it. So it was just like fun on top of fun on top of fun, and then a book came out of it.
Okay, nice. You said you're an avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
So am I. So are all these people watching right now. What do you like to read in your free time?
The little free time I have now, though, science fiction. Science fiction's always been a love of mine.
Okay.
I used to read pretty much every Star Trek novel that came out.
Nice.
I mean, I would go Deep Space Nine. I mean, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, original. I mean, because back when I was in high school, I swear they made like one every month, and I would just tick through them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them behind you probably that you've read.
I think I had all of them. I did. I actually, before I moved down here to Alabama, I had to donate all of them to a library because I had boxes of them I couldn't bring. So it would be science fiction, and that also got my love into working with engineering too.
Okay,
that really got me going on that.
The influence of Star Trek.
Oh, big time. I'm a huge Trekkie. But so science fiction and any good adventure story I could find. I love like the authors like Douglas Preston, Lincoln Child, you know, the Relic novel they put out, and then anything with a giant monster.
Yeah.
You know, if you give me a giant monster, I probably am going to read that novel. I mean, like Steve Alton's Meg, which is just a giant shark. You know, like that could eat Jaws. And I'm like, that's what I want. I want a giant shark, not one that will creep up on me. I want this giant thing that will eat a house.
Yeah.
So any kind of stories like that.
Who's your favorite author?
Favorite author? Man, that's a toughie. You know, I'm going to go comic book wise, so I'm going to say Stan Lee.
Okay. Stan Lee.
He. It's probably because I love old stories so much, but the thoughts he went about his characters to, you know, take a subject like an individual's blind and make Daredevil out of it.
Yeah.
You know, that really, and I don't think I've ever read a Stan Lee story and went, that was boring.
Yeah, right? They're always very exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course, he worked with great artists as well. What about your favorite book? Your Desert Island book. You're trapped on an island, one book. What is it?
Oh, Desert Island book. It would be The Relic.
Okay.
The Relic by Douglas Preston and Conchard. I found that when the movie came out back in, I don't know, like 2000 or something, and I was just flipping through that thing. I could read it 3 or 4 times.
Nice. Okay. What's the last great movie you've seen?
Oh man, we don't get the great movie.
Yes.
Yikes! 'Cause we just saw Justice League, and that was a good movie. And man, Thor was really good, funny too, and it was good. Great movie. It's probably Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
You know, Wonder Woman was the. I watched that and I'm sitting there going, there's stuff that's just comic book wise of this, but I'm like, I'm enjoying every second of this movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go Wonder Woman on that.
All right. We're talking about movies and comics. Would you ever want to write for other media like comics, TV, movies?
I really would. I would
Yeah?
if I had that chance. Just because I think the way I think, just because I've been ingrained in television and movies enough so much. If you read the first book, like a buddy of mine came up to me on the first novel, and he's like, "You wrote a montage. If I had music playing, this whole like section is a montage of him learning his powers." I'm like, yeah, because montages are awesome.
Yes, they are.
You know, so I mean, I think of how the reader would be envisioning the story going on, because in my head it's a movie playing, and I'm like, I know I could. That would be awesome to see on the screen. And comic book wise would be great to be able to write for, because to see my characters drawn and done, that is just I get a big kick out of that. We actually did a charity event called the Great Gray Ghost Art Contest, and we had artists from all over the country submit what they thought the gray ghost looked like.
Yeah.
You know, you read a novel, I read a novel, we both think, you know, the character looks a little different.
Yeah.
And I incorporated that into the second book. So all of the artwork in the second book, the first book I did all the artwork, but the second book, all the artwork is actually the winning entries from that art contest.
Nice.
And we had a gentleman named Bradley Beard, who's a big pop artist in Vegas, enter, and actually Rich Coase Svengoolie entered it. And we had a number of other people, and their art is in there showing what they think the gray ghost looks like. And every time I got an email, I'm like, he thought it looked like that.
That's an interesting experiment, though, too, to see what people's interpretations of your characters look like.
Because a lot of them were different. I mean, everyone sort of got the fact he wore a coat and he had a hat, but the fact I I had put a drawing of what I thought he looked like in it,
Uh-huh.
but they still went different from that. I mean, Bradley Beard added a skull. I had thought that the Gray Ghost, behind his mask was all fogged and sort of ghosty, and Bradley added that ghost and changed it into a skull with like flames coming out of the ends of it. I'm like, oh, that's good. And actually, that kind of artwork inspired certain scenes in the book.
Yeah.
I changed it around. Like, I need to use that piece somewhere in the book. So there's a certain part where the Gray Ghost looks like Bradley Beard's
that's
idea.
awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So comic books, we've talked about it a little bit. How did a love of comics did it influence this work in any kind of way?
In this work?
Yeah.
Definitely. Comic books are actually what got me into reading.
Okay.
I started when I was much younger. I didn't love reading novels. They were big, they were bulky, but I picked up issues of Brave of the Bold with Batman and the Phantom Stranger. I still have it.
Nice.
And I picked it up, I don't even know where, fell in love with that book. And I just kept going to like drugstores and getting comics, getting more and more. And I found my love of Superman, who's my favorite character.
Okay.
But I've just collected comics throughout the years. And after a while, when they started going up in price, a friend of mine got me a novel of Batman.
Yeah.
It was like the Tales of the Batman. You probably have it.
I had one that I remember back in the day that one of my grandmothers gave me, and it had no dust cover on it or nothing, but it was just said like Batman. It had a bunch of different short stories in it.
Yeah, that was it. They had a couple of those, and I read that. I'm like, that took me like a week. I could read a comic in 5 minutes. Hey, that's only $7.
Yeah, right.
So then I found more actual comic-based novels, and that started me going more into like, well, hey, there's Star Trek novels. Okay, I got it, and just kept me rolling in actual literature, and I then went into more, classical literature and stuff. So comics just started me off pretty much, I would say, everything I do. Because, reading comics got me into books. Books got me into Star Trek. Star Trek got me into NASA. Here I am.
Absolutely.
So comics, though, I sort of see how the characters, if say you just pick up an issue of Superman now, you know who Superman is. So you don't need to know he was a, alien from far off. And once I was able to explain who Joe was in the first book. Once the second book started, I was just like, I could just go. Let's go. Let's, action here, mystery. And it was a lot easier since I knew who that character was. And I knew that the readers knew who that character was. Sort of like if you just pick up a comic today.
Yeah. Okay. So you said Superman's your favorite superhero.
Absolutely.
Ever. Why is that?
Because Superman, no matter what year it is, to me always feels like that old, Max Fletcher cartoon.
Yeah.
It's just dun-dun-dun. He's always going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And maybe it's just because I don't always love drama. I didn't need to hear, this horrible thing. Uncle Ben didn't die, or, the Waynes weren't killed. Superman just does it because Superman knows it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that kind of conviction a character could have, apart from the fact he can fly, which is awesome. I just, I love as long as they keep to that core, of who the character is, every time they just redo a movie or the comic or the costume, I just keep with them and I like them.
Nice. All right. What's your favorite pulp hero? Since Gray Ghost is a pulp influenced hero.
Pulp, yeah. Actually, he's a lot of mixtures of, like the Green Hornet or the Shadow. But my favorite pulp hero is actually the Rocketeer.
Oh, nice.
Which I wish I had more stuff of the Rocketeer. He's a very, limited character.
Yeah.
But the Rocketeer, I just love, and it probably goes along with the Superman idea. I love the idea of a character flying, which was a thing the Gray Ghost originally did. I'm like, no, you can't have him fly.
Too much.
Too much. But yeah, the Rocketeer, I found out about him back when that 90s movie came out, and then found the original Rocketeer comic, which I probably should not have found back then because it's not the most, it's a little adult.
Yeah, it's a little edgy.
Yeah. Betty's...
Surprisingly so.
Yeah, Betty is not like she is in the movie. But but I've loved the fact they've actually brought him back lately. They even had a novel come out of short stories of the Rocketeer, sort of like that Batman one I mentioned, and I picked that up.
Nice.
And they've had a couple comic series that I've picked up. I just love that character because he's bumbling, but he's got a rocket pack. You know?
Will the Gray Ghost ever get a rocket pack? Maybe, possibly.
Man, that would be cool to get a rocket
Maybe
pack.
a rocket pack partner? Rocket Lad?
Rocket
something
Lad.
Like that. Something like that. Right?
Awesome ideas. I just have to make it make sense.
Yeah, well, I expect full credit for Rocket
Yeah,
Lad.
if there's a Rocket Lad, he came up with it.
Anyway, one more writing thing. Writer's block. Do you believe in it?
I believe it probably happens if your main, and I'm going to cheat here. If your main job is writing, I definitely can understand that happening. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, as with my main job, I get into situations where I'm like, why didn't that work? And I can see if you're a writer 24/7, I could see it just after a while you hitting a wall with it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, since this is like a hobby on top of a hobby to top of a hobby, and it just comes together, I don't usually run into that.
Okay.
Because if I run into writing block, I go, yeah, I'm going to go work on the cover.
Yeah.
And I walk away from it. And maybe it's just walking away from it. Because if you have to get that deadline, I would be sitting there going, I hate doing this.
Yeah.
But since I get to walk away from it and I'm not on a deadline, it's easier.
All right. So tell everybody where they can find the book, when they can get the sequel, and all that jazz.
Okay, well, the novel is available at anywhere books are sold. The first novel was The Gray Ghost Shadow That Walks, and it's available in both paperback and on the Amazon Kindle. As I said, anywhere books. So I mean Barnes Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, even local university bookstores have it.
Okay.
So that is out available now, and on December 12th. The sequel, The Gray Ghost, The Jewel Kiss Mysteries, is going to be released, and that'll be available to buy anywhere, again, where books are sold, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes Noble, and again on the Amazon Kindle. Also, though, at the Deep Comics and Games, they will have copies of the original novel, the second novel, and a combo pack novel that will only be available there for a little while before it goes on mass production, which has both novels put together. It's entitled The Gray Ghost Stories, and it's literally just I glued two novels together.
Nice.
I made a new cover, because it actually is a nice size of a book. If you have a regular hardback novel, it's about that size.
Yeah.
So it worked out to have that. We are going to have two book signings coming up. So the book comes out on the 12th, and we are going to have a book signing at the Deep Comics and Games here in Huntsville from 1 to 3 p.m. And that's on Saturday, December 16th.
16th, yes.
Yes. All right.
I think.
I should have wrote that down somewhere. Yeah. But then on December 17th, here still in Huntsville at Mad Malt's Brewery, we're having another book signing from 1 to 3 as well. So that's two book signings, and we're going to be doing, we're going to have cupcakes at the Deep. So come get a cupcake if you want anything.
Yeah.
And, it's Mad Malt's Brewery for the second one.
Absolutely. So, guys, if you're local here in Huntsville, come and check them out at the Deep and at Mad Malt's Brewery. December 12th, of course, is when the second novel comes out.
Yes.
We will throw links to the novels down below so you can find them easy. Nicholas, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for checking out. What was that? One more thing? Did you say something?
Nope.
Oh, I thought you were okay. I always end these things weird. It's just the way we do it here.
Oh, is that how you do it?
I'm Rockin Robbie Billups. This is Nicholas Cara. This is PCP. Thanks for watching the video. Check out the book.